The room was small, barely large enough for a cot, a chamber pot, and a cracked wooden stool, but to Clara McGraw, it might as well have been a grave. Pale morning light trickled through the slatted window like weak tea, the dust dancing in it like restless ghosts. The wallpaper peeled in long, curling strips, and the cold stone floor bit at her bare feet. She had once counted the boards in the ceiling, desperate for distraction. 43. All warped with moisture. All silent witnesses to her slow unraveling. Somewhere downstairs, a door slammed. Bootsteps followed, heavy, angry. Clara didn't flinch. She'd learned not to show fear. That only made it worse. Instead, she stared at the knot in the wood on the far wall and breathed through her nose, slowly, evenly. Her heart still beat too loud, though. She hated that about her body. It never learned how to pretend. The lock turned. Keys jingled. Clara stood, her cotton dress hanging loose off her frame like a scarecrow's shroud. The door creaked open. Lemuel McGraw stood in the threshold, chewing something brown and foul-smelling. His boots were still muddy from the barn, and his eyes flicked over Clara with that same mixture of contempt and ownership. "You eat yet?" he asked. She didn't answer. He stepped into the room and slapped her across the face, casual, like swatting a fly. Her cheek stung, but she didn't cry. She hadn't cried in weeks. "I asked you a question." "No," she said, voice even. He grunted and tossed a tin plate on the floor. A slab of dried beef and half a biscuit rolled off it. Clara didn't move. Lemuel leaned in close, the scent of tobacco and sweat curling in her nostrils. "Ungrateful, ain't you?" he muttered. "My brother was too soft on you. Let you read. Let you talk back. Now look at you, thinkin' you're too good for the likes of us." Clara held his gaze, defiant. He was too good for you. That earned her another slap. Harder, this time, ringing in her ears like a church bell. Lemuel sneered, then turned to leave. "Eat that, or don't. We got business tonight. Man comin' through who's lookin' to buy." Clara froze, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "Buy." Lemuel chuckled as he walked away. "Ain't nobody gonna feed a useless widow forever, girl. Best you start thinkin' of ways to be useful." The door slammed shut and the lock clicked again. She was alone with her racing thoughts, the plate of insult sitting at her feet. She sat on the edge of the cot, fingers trembling, though her face remained still. Years ago, she might have wept, but not anymore. She traced the bruise forming on her cheek and let her mind drift, not to escape, but to remember who she used to be. Before all this, she'd been Clara Winslow, daughter of a preacher, lover of books, barefoot girl who ran through creek beds and sang songs to the sky. She'd met Samuel McGraw when she was 20. He was sweet, awkward, and nothing like the stories she'd been told about his family. He read poetry to her by firelight, brought her wildflowers, built a swing on their little plot of land. He died 3 years later, caught under a spooked horse during a cattle drive. There had been blood on his boots when they brought him back. Clara hadn't even been allowed to say goodbye. They buried him under a crooked tree behind the barn, and everything changed. Lemuel and his brothers took the land, boarded up the library Samuel had built for her, and locked her away in this room. At first, she'd fought. She'd screamed, clawed thrown plates. But no one came. The townsfolk believed she'd moved away to live with family out east. Her letters to her father never made it past the porch. After a while, the silence became a second skin. But her mind? That was hers. She had a diary hidden beneath the floorboards, pages filled with secret thoughts and careful plans. She wrote with charcoal stolen from the fireplace, words dancing between the lines of pain and hope. Each night, she hummed old hymns and traced escape routes in her mind. She wouldn't die here. The wind howled outside as the day wore on, rattling the loose window pane. Clara paced, mind sharp. Lemuel had said someone was coming. Tonight. She had to move before then. She knelt beside the fireplace, fingers probing between the stones. Last month, she'd noticed a rusted nail protruding from a loose brick. She tugged at it now, breath held, until the stone shifted. Behind it, tucked away like a gift, was the stub of an iron tool. A broken hinge, maybe, sharp on one end. Heavy enough. She held it in her hand, heart pounding. It wasn't much, but it might be enough. The sun dipped low, and the room darkened. Shadows stretched across the walls. Clara slid the tool into her dress pocket and waited. Her ears strained for sounds. Laughter from the kitchen. A dog barking. A door creaking open and then slamming shut. Lemuel and the others were likely drinking. They always did, before company. The hour crawled. Then quiet. Clara slipped the tool from her pocket and approached the window. She'd been working at the wooden slats for days now, prying at them with stolen hairpins and fingernails. Tonight, she had leverage. She wedged the metal into a split in the frame and twisted. The wood groaned, splintered. One slat came loose. Then another. She pressed her face to the gap. Cold air kissed her cheek. Moonlight. Stars. The scent of open land. Freedom. She squeezed one hand through the gap. Then her shoulders. It was tight, bruising, but she pushed through. Her feet scraped the sill, and then she was falling, softly, into a patch of weeds below. Her breath hitched. She was outside. The night wrapped around her like a blanket. Crickets sang. The barn loomed nearby. She crept through the shadows, heart hammering. If she could just make it to the creek, follow it to town. Clara. The voice sliced through the night like a whip. She turned. Lemuel stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the lantern behind him. A shotgun rested in his hands. "You stupid bitch," he spat. "Thought you could crawl outta here like a rat?" She ran. Footsteps thundered behind her. She didn't look back. The field was uneven, rocks biting into her feet, but she didn't stop. Her lungs burned. Branches slashed at her face. Then a sharp pain. A hand grabbed her hair, yanked hard. She went down hard, the wind knocked out of her. Lemuel stood over her, panting, red-faced. He struck her once, twice, until the night blurred. When she came to, she was back in the room. The door slammed shut. The lock clicked. The silence returned. Her lip was bleeding, one eye swollen, but her spirit still burning. She crawled to the corner, tore up a loose floorboard, and opened her diary. Her fingers smeared blood on the page as she wrote. "Tonight I saw the stars again. I felt wind. I'm not broken. Not yet." She didn't sleep. Dawn came gray and heavy. Footsteps returned. Clara sat, back straight, hair wild, a bruise blooming along her cheekbone. Lemuel opened the door. "You're lucky he still wants to meet you," he grumbled. "Be ready. Wash your face." Clara said nothing. He left. She waited, breath slow, measured. Her fingers curled around the broken hinge in her pocket. If tonight was the night she'd be sold like cattle, then someone would bleed before it happened. And far beyond the hills, unseen and unknown to her, a rider was coming. Dust on his coat, guns on his hip, a man with his own ghosts and a knack for mercy. But for now, Clara was alone. Alone but not beaten. Dust hung in the late afternoon air, shimmering gold and red like fireflies trapped in amber. The outlaw rode slow, slouched in his saddle, the brim of his hat pulled low to shade his face from the sinking sun. His horse, a grizzled mare with a limp on her left side, plodded along as if she too were tired of the road. The trail that led into Dustwater Creek was cracked and dry, the weeds brittle enough to crumble under a breath. Jesse Coulter, known in some circles as Mercy, was not a man who smiled easily nor spoke often. His revolver had done most of the talking in his life, but he carried himself with a quiet gravity, like a man who'd seen the worst of people and chose, strangely, to still look for the good in them. A scar curved along his jaw, half hidden by a patchy beard, and his eyes were pale gray, like cold ash. As he entered the town, the few folks on the street glanced his way, then looked quickly away. Not because he was feared, not anymore. He'd left that life behind, mostly, but his name still traveled faster than he did, and some stories refused to die. He didn't blame them. He wouldn't trust a man who looked like him either. He tied his horse outside the saloon and stepped inside. The place reeked of stale beer and tobacco. A piano sat untouched in the corner. The bartender, a round man with a twitchy eye, squinted when Jesse approached the counter. "Don't want no trouble," the man said automatically. "Don't aim to give you any," Jesse replied, voice dry as the dirt outside. "Just want a drink." The man poured whiskey. Jesse took it without thanks and scanned the room. A group of ranch hands played cards in the corner. An old man snored into his hat. No one of importance, until a tall man in preacher's garb stepped in from the rear room and stopped short when he saw Jesse. Their eyes met. The preacher looked startled, then curious. Jesse sipped his drink. "You look like you got something on your chest." The preacher stepped closer, face shadowed beneath the brim of his hat. "Name's Ezra Winslow. I know who you are. Rode with Danvers' gang once, didn't you? Years back." Jesse didn't answer. Winslow pressed on. "They say you killed a marshal in his own home." "I didn't," Jesse said. "But I was there when it happened. Ain't proud of that." The preacher nodded slowly. "Then maybe the Lord left some mercy in you after all." Jesse raised an eyebrow. "You don't strike me as the type to look for help in a saloon." "I don't usually, but I don't know where else to go." The preacher's voice lowered. "My daughter, Clara, she's missing. Has been for months. Word was she moved out east, but I never got a letter. Not even once. That girl wrote me every week since she could hold a pen." Jesse frowned. "What's this got to do with me?" "I think she's still here," Ezra said, voice thickening. "Still on that damn McGraw property." Jesse leaned back. "McGraw's? Ain't that where the widow lived? Samuel's girl?" Ezra nodded. "He died, 2 winters ago? Trampled in a cattle stampede." Jesse's jaw tightened. He remembered Samuel, quiet fella, always kept his boots clean and never pick a fight. Married that sweet preacher's daughter. Jesse had crossed paths with them once during a delivery. Samuel had offered him a cup of coffee and directions without a trace of judgment. Jesse hadn't forgotten that. "You saying they're holding her?" he asked. Ezra lowered his voice further. "I believe so. But no one listens. The sheriff's in their pocket. Says she left by her own choice. I've knocked. I've called. No answer. They keep the house locked up like a vault. I just know it. My daughter's in there." Jesse set his glass down. The whiskey barely touched his gut. He pulled his hat lower, thinking. He had no cause to get involved. Not really. But something twisted in his chest. A memory of a younger girl with dark hair laughing at something her husband had whispered. "Where's the property?" Ezra gave directions. Jesse listened, memorizing every turn. When the preacher finished, Jesse nodded once, tight and grim. "I'll go look," he said. The McGraw place sat on a hill east of town, half-eaten by weeds and surrounded by sagging fence lines. Jesse arrived just after dusk, keeping his horse downwind and tying her to a low branch in the tree-line. He watched the house for a long time, crouched in the brush. A lantern glowed behind a curtained window. Shadows passed by now, and then broad figures slow-moving. No sign of Clara. Jesse waited. An hour passed. Then 2. Finally, a door opened. One man, big, slouched, holding a jug, stepped onto the porch. He laughed, spat, then stumbled toward the barn. Jesse slipped from his hiding spot and moved around the rear of the house, silent as a ghost. He found a window low to the ground, partially slatted with wood. Just a crack, but enough to see. A woman sat inside, shoulders straight, hair unkempt, a dark bruise painting her cheek. Her hands moved across a page in her lap, writing something with what looked like a blackened stick. Her lips moved as she wrote. Jesse's breath caught. She looked thinner than he remembered, paler. But it was her, Clara, and she was a prisoner. He crept back to the trees and waited until the house quieted, then circled to the side door. It was bolted, but old. The lock groaned under his knife and gave way. Inside, the air reeked of rot and old meat. He moved room by room, avoiding the creaking boards, ears sharp for the sound of boots or voices. The corridor was narrow, dark. He reached the door at the end, the one he'd seen from outside. He knocked once softly. A pause. Then a voice, wary. "Who's there?" "Clara," he said. "It's Jesse Coulter. Mercy." Silence. Your daddy sent me. More silence. Then a shuffle. The door opened a crack, chains clinking on the inside. Clara's face appeared, eyes wide. Jesse. He nodded. Are you real? He gave a soft smile. I better be. She pulled the door open further. Her eyes shone, not with tears, but fury. I was about to escape on my own. I don't doubt it. I'm not weak, she added. No one said you were. They stood there for a moment, the air between them tense, heavy. Jesse glanced behind her. You got anything you can't leave? She shook her head. Only what's in my head. Good. Let's go. She grabbed a worn satchel, stuffed it with a diary, and slipped on a coat that barely fit her. Jesse led the way back down the hall, but footsteps boomed upstairs. Clara, a voice called out. Where the hell you at? Lemuel. They froze. Jesse spun, drew his revolver, and pushed Clara behind him. I'll draw him, he whispered. You slip out the window. Get to the tree line. I'm not leaving without you, she hissed. We ain't got time to argue. Too late. Lemuel rounded the corner, rifle in hand, eyes bloodshot. You son of a bitch, he snarled. Jesse fired first. The shot rang out like thunder, tearing into Lemuel's shoulder. He went down screaming. Go. Jesse barked, grabbing Clara's hand. They bolted through the hallway, glass shattering behind them as another McGraw cousin opened fire. Jesse kicked open the back door. Clara ducked low, running like hell toward the brush. Bullets ripped through the night. One clipped Jesse's arm, just a graze. He kept moving. They made it to the trees, heartbeats thundering. Jesse shoved Clara behind a fallen log and knelt beside her, breathing hard. You hit, he asked. No. Good. She turned, staring at him. Why did you come? Jesse wiped the blood from his arm, winced. Couldn't ignore it. You don't even know me. I knew your husband. And your father. That was enough. Clara reached out and touched his shoulder gently. Thank you. He looked at her, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. This ain't over. They'll come after us. I know, she said. Do you still want to run? No, she whispered. I want to fight. Jesse nodded once. They both turned toward the dark horizon. Somewhere beyond it, freedom waited. Or hell. But whichever it was, they'd ride into it together. The rain came in thick sheets, hammering down from a bruised sky, drenching the land in cold and shadow. Jesse and Clara rode hard, the horses' hooves pounding muddy earth, each breath of theirs a white plume in the chilled air. The trees whipped past like blurred sentinels, branches lashing at them as if to drive them back. Thunder cracked overhead, loud enough to rattle bones, but neither flinched. Jesse's arm ached from the gunshot graze. Blood soaked his sleeve, sticky and warm against the cold. He didn't mention it. Clara clung to him from behind, soaked through, her teeth chattering, but her eyes stayed sharp, scanning the darkness for movement. She was no longer the silent woman in a locked room. She was watching, planning. They veered off the road and into a shallow ravine, the horse slipping in the mud, but finding its balance. They followed the creek upstream, the same creek Clara had traced in her mind 100 times in that little room. Jesse had listened to her directions, trusted her memory, even when lightning made every tree look like the last. Behind them, faint but certain, came the sound of pursuit. Riders, yelling, dogs barking, gunmetal slicing through the storm. The McGraws weren't letting her go quietly. Clara leaned close to Jesse's ear. There's an old trapping shelter about a mile up the ridge. My husband built it. Used to keep salted meat and dry firewood there. If it's still standing. He nodded. It's worth the gamble. They turned east, cutting across a narrow bluff where the path narrowed dangerously. The horse struggled against the rising grade, and Clara jumped down to run alongside, slipping and catching herself on exposed roots. Mud coated her legs, soaked into her boots, but she pressed on, helping guide the horse when Jesse's grip faltered. They reached the shelter just as the rain hit its peak. A low, moss-covered structure nestled beneath a rock outcropping, barely visible through the mist. Jesse dismounted and pulled Clara inside. The walls groaned in protest, but held. Inside it was dark, musty, but dry. Firewood sat in the corner, miraculously preserved. Clara lit a match with shaking hands. The flame flickered, caught. A soft orange glow filled the space. Jesse sank to the floor with a grunt, his back against the wall, breath shallow. Clara knelt beside him. "You're bleeding bad." "I've had worse," he muttered, wincing as she peeled back the soaked fabric. The wound wasn't deep, but it was messy, torn open by the ride. She found an old canteen, some cloth, and worked quickly, biting her lip to keep from crying. "You shouldn't have come for me," she whispered. Jesse looked at her, sweat beading on his brow. "Ain't the first time I've done something stupid." She smiled, just a little. Then it faded. "They're coming. Lemuel won't stop. He'll chase us until we're dead." "I don't plan on dying," Jesse said. "And I sure as hell don't plan on letting them take you back." Clara sat back, staring at the flickering firelight. Her hands were scraped raw, nails broken. Her dress was torn and caked with dirt. But her spine remained straight, her chin high. "I used to think if I was quiet enough, obedient enough, they'd let me be. That grief would soften them, that time would wear them down. And did it? No. It made them crueler. And it made me harder." Jesse watched her in the firelight. There was steel in her now, tempered, honed. The kind that didn't crack. Outside, a twig snapped. Then another. Jesse's head jerked toward the door. Clara was already moving, grabbing the rifle stashed along the wall. Samuel's old repeater. Still loaded. Still oiled. Voices drifted in with the rain. "She's in there. Spread out. Don't shoot unless you have to. Lem wants her alive." Clara's grip tightened. Jesse forced himself to his feet, teeth gritted. He drew his revolver and took position by the narrow window slit. The shelter offered little defense. One room, one door, thin walls. It would be a slaughter if they stayed boxed in. Clara looked at Jesse. "We can't stay." "Nope. But we can make them bleed." "Now you're talking." She handed him a second rifle, heavier, meant for hunting elk. He checked it, nodded. Together, they doused the fire, plunging the room into darkness. Rain still fell in sheets outside, but now, within the storm, came the sound of footsteps closing in. Jesse moved to the door, cracked it open. Shapes flickered in the mist. 3 men, guns drawn, one with a lantern. Clara stood at the opposite wall, breath steady. Jesse waited until the lantern light moved past the shelter, backlit the men just enough to create silhouettes. Then he fired. The nearest man dropped instantly. The lantern clattered to the ground, casting wild shadows. The other 2 shouted, turned, and returned fire, bullets punching through the wooden walls. Clara fired next. Her shot rang out with a satisfying thump, another man down. The last one shouted, retreating into the trees. More voices answered, more were coming. "Time to move," Jesse said. They burst out the back, racing through the trees, sliding down the muddy hill. Behind them, gunshots cracked through the rain. Clara stumbled once, but righted herself. Jesse kept pace, every step a battle against gravity. They reached a rocky outcrop and ducked behind it, catching their breath. Jesse scanned the tree-line. Figures were spreading out. Torches. Lanterns. A net closing fast. Clara pointed to a ridge above. "There's a narrow pass up there. If we can get across, they can't follow with horses." Jesse nodded. "Then we climb." The ridge was steep, slick with moss and runoff. Jesse boosted Clara up first, then followed, every muscle screaming. Gunfire echoed below as the McGraws found the shelter, found their dead. Clara reached the top and dropped to her knees, pulling Jesse the final few feet. They lay side by side, soaked, shaking, alive. "They won't follow us across this," she gasped. "Too narrow. Too high. It'll buy us time." Jesse looked at her, rain dripping from his hat brim. "You sure you're not part mountain goat?" She laughed. Not much, but enough to lighten the weight pressing down on them. Below, voices called out. Orders barked. But no one dared to climb. "Not yet. We've got one chance," Jesse said. "There's a cabin I know, tucked between 2 ridges north of here. Belonged to a friend. He's long gone, but the place is still there. We can hole up, heal, figure out what comes next." Clara nodded. "Let's go." They traveled the rest of the night in silence, feet squelching through mud, every gust of wind biting deep. But they didn't stop. Not until the sky began to lighten, bleeding soft gold into the gray. They reached the cabin as dawn crept over the horizon. It was small, weather-beaten, half swallowed by vines. But it had walls, a roof, a door that locked. Jesse pushed it open, gun drawn, but found only dust and silence. No threats, no ghosts. He let out a breath. We made it. Clara stepped inside, eyes sweeping the space. A table, a rusted stove, a cot. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. She turned to him, then really looked at him for the first time since the escape. He looked half dead, pale, bleeding again. She moved to him, without asking, and began unbuttoning his shirt to tend the wound properly. Jesse let her. Didn't think I'd ever breathe free air again, she murmured. You did that, he said. You got yourself out. Not alone. No, he admitted. But you never needed me to save you. I just gave you the door. She leaned over, pressing the bandage into his arm, and their eyes met. The silence between them wasn't awkward now. It was something else, earned, heavy with everything said and unsaid. Outside, the rain slowed. Birds began to stir. A new day was forming. Clara stepped back and sat across from him. They'll come again. Let 'em, Jesse said, voice low. Next time we won't run. She smiled, small but fierce. We'll make our stand, she said. And in the pale light of dawn, with gunpowder still clinging to the air and the storm fading behind them, the widow and the outlaw prepared to meet whatever came next. Together. The cabin was still as a held breath, steeped in a calm that comes after a storm, but before the next strike. Clara stood at the single window, rifle cradled in her arms, watching the narrow pass beyond the trees. Jesse sat at the table, sharpening a knife, the sound of stone against steel rhythmic and slow. He wore a sling now, his shoulder bound tightly in fresh bandages, thanks to Clara's steady hands. They'd spent 3 days here, holed up in that crooked little shack with its creaky floorboards and leaking roof. The time had passed in silence, broken only by the whisper of strategy, the occasional clink of weapon maintenance, and the quiet moments in which Jesse would catch Clara staring into the fire, her eyes shadowed by thoughts he didn't dare interrupt. But she wasn't broken. Far from it. Clara had shed the skin of the imprisoned widow with every passing hour. Her voice had grown firmer, her steps more certain. She cleaned their weapons with the precision of a soldier, mapped the surrounding terrain in her mind, and when she spoke now, it was with the voice of someone who'd stopped hoping for mercy and started preparing for justice. Jesse looked up from his blade. They'll come soon. Clara nodded. I know. I want them to. He watched her for a moment, the defiance in her posture, the fire behind her gaze. Something stirred in his chest, pride, admiration, maybe something deeper. But he didn't speak it. Not now. Words were a luxury. Action was what they needed. They'd seen the signs that morning. Smoke on the horizon. Hoof prints in the soft dirt by the stream. The McGraws had tracked them. And this time, they'd brought more than torches. Jesse counted at least 6 men. Armed. Mounted. Hungry for blood. Lemuel would be among them. He would never stop. Not until Clara was dead or his again, and Jesse knew which one the bastard preferred. Clara turned from the window. They'll come through the choke point. That's our only advantage. If we can funnel them, we can hold them off. We. Jesse raised an eyebrow. She gave a faint smirk. You didn't think I'd sit this one out, did you? He shook his head. Not for a second. They moved quickly, laying traps along the narrow path, tripwires made of twine, buried spikes fashioned from broken branches, and oil-soaked rags ready to be set ablaze. Clara's hands never hesitated. Her mind worked faster than his, anticipating every angle. She had turned fear into focus, pain into purpose. By afternoon, the trap was set. They waited in the trees above the pass, nestled behind rocks and brush. The wind had died. Even the birds had gone quiet. Jesse laid beside her, rifle braced against a log, sight trained down the trail. Clara adjusted her grip. You think it'll work? It'll work, he said. But what he didn't say was that it wouldn't matter. Not entirely. Not unless Lemuel fell. Because until that man's blood soaked the dirt, Clara would never truly be free. The sound of hooves echoed through the canyon. Slow, deliberate. Then came the creak of leather, the clink of spurs, the rough laughter of men who thought they were invincible. 6 riders. 1 torchbearer. Lemuel rode near the front, shotgun across his lap, mouth twisted into a scowl. Jesse steadied his aim. You want him. Clara's eyes narrowed. He's mine. The first trap triggered when the lead horse stepped over the ridge. Rope pulled tight across the path. The animal screamed, crashed sideways, throwing its rider. The man barely had time to react before a spike tore through his leg. Chaos erupted. Jesse fired, dropping the second rider with a single shot to the chest. Clara moved like a ghost, rising from the brush, firing once, twice. A man fell screaming, his gun tumbling from his hand. Another took cover, yelling for the others to spread out. Then came Lemuel's voice, commanding, brutal. Push forward. They ain't but 2 of them. Another shot rang out. Clara ducked, but not before locking eyes with her brother-in-law. Recognition. Hatred. Lemuel dismounted, crouched behind a boulder, and fired blindly into the trees. Clara, he roared. You think you can kill me? You ain't got the guts. You were nothing before Samuel, and you're less than nothing now. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her silence spoke louder than any insult. The remaining McGraws pressed forward, ignoring the traps. Jesse caught one trying to flank them and dropped him with a clean shot to the gut. The man wailed, rolled, then went still. Then Clara moved. She slid from the tree line and raced down the ridge, drawing Lemuel's fire. Jesse cursed and covered her, shooting at anyone who tried to follow. She moved like someone who didn't care if she lived or died, only that she ended this. Lemuel rose, grinning like a devil, and leveled his shotgun at her. Clara dove behind a rock just as he fired, pellets shattering bark and stone. She came up on one knee, aimed, and fired. Her bullet caught him in the leg. He howled and fell, blood pouring from the wound. But he didn't stay down. Clara stood, gun trained on him. Lemuel spat blood, grinning. Go ahead. Shoot me, girl. You'll always be a McGraw. Doesn't matter how many of us you kill. Her hands didn't shake. You're wrong. She stepped closer, each word like a blade. I was never one of you. You locked me away, starved me, beat me. But I didn't die. I changed. He raised his hand slowly, reaching for a pistol tucked in his belt. She fired. Once. The shot echoed through the trees, final and absolute. Lemuel's body jerked, then crumpled. His eyes stayed open, staring at nothing. The rest of the McGraw men scattered. Jesse emerged from the trees, gun still smoking, blood seeping through his shirt again. But his face held something new. Relief. Clara stood over Lemuel's body for a long time. Then she turned and walked to Jesse, face unreadable. It's done, she said. He nodded. It is. They burned the bodies that night, the flames high and bright against the black sky. Neither spoke much. There was no need. Something fundamental had shifted, not just in the world around them, but inside. Jesse watched Clara as the fire crackled, her face lit in gold and shadow. She didn't look like a victim anymore. She looked like someone reborn. The next morning dawned quiet and clean. The rain had washed the earth, and the sky stretched wide and blue above the ridges. They packed what little they had and left the cabin behind, heading north on foot. A week later, they reached a stretch of land Jesse once claimed for himself. A river ran through it, and the grass swayed like ocean waves. There was no town, no neighbors, just silence and sun. They built a small house together. Nothing fancy, just 4 walls, a roof, and a porch that looked west. Jesse's wound healed slowly. Clara planted herbs in a clay pot. She kept Samuel's old rifle near the door, and Jesse's knife stayed within reach. Just in case. But no one came. Time passed. 1 year later, on a spring morning thick with birdsong, Clara stepped out wearing a faded dress, her hair braided down her back. Jessie stood under the sycamore tree, holding something wrapped in cloth. She walked to him. Inside the cloth was a simple ring, silver, a little bent, but shining. He said nothing, just offered it. Clara took it, tears in her eyes. They married beneath the tree with the wind as witness, and the river humming softly behind them. And as they stood there, hand in hand, Clara lifted her face to the sky. For the first time in a long time, she felt no fear, no shadows behind the door, no footsteps coming down the hall, only freedom. Jessie squeezed her hand. "You still think I shouldn't have come for you?" Clara smiled. "I think I was waiting for the chance to come for myself. You just helped me take it." They stayed there a while, arms wrapped around each other, the sun climbing higher, painting everything gold. Some stories don't end in revenge or fire. Some end in the quiet triumph of survival. And for Clara McGraw, now Clara Coulter, that was enough. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Freedom's a flame. Keep it burning.